"Next stop, Wildcat Crossing," said the announcer.
"We're almost there,"
said Benny. The 6-year-old boy pressed his nose against the train window. He watched the Texas desert scenery race by. "And we're right on time," said Benny's 14-year-old brother Henry. He glanced across the aisle at Jessie, who smiled. The 2 older siblings had a secret they were keeping from their young siblings. Their little sister Violet, who was 10, was sleeping peacefully next to Benny. Watch, their wire-haired terrier, dozed at Jessie's feet. The Alden children were riding on the Lone Star Flyer, a train that ran through parts of the American Southwest. Their grandfather had put them on the train in El Paso that morning. They were going to spend a few fun days at the annual Wild West Festival. It took place in a town called Wildcat Crossing. Jessie gently nudged Violet. "Let's get our bags so we'll be ready to get off the train," she said. Jessie was 12 and often acted motherly toward her 2 younger siblings.
"I was dreaming about our boxcar,"
Violet said, smiling and rubbing her eyes.
"The train makes me think of our boxcar too,"
said Benny. At one time, the Alden children had lived in an old railroad boxcar in the woods. Their parents had died, and they had run away instead of going to live with Mr. Alden, their grandfather. They had heard that he was mean, but he turned out to be really very nice. Happily, he found his grandchildren and brought them to live with him. He even moved the boxcar to his backyard in Greenfield. "I think we're here," said Henry. The train slowed down and came to a gentle stop. "Wildcat Crossing," said the announcer. "Welcome to the Wild West." "Okay, let's get our bags and go," said Jessie. She and Henry grabbed their suitcases and herded the younger children to the exit. They were the only passengers who got off the train.
"Wow, look at that,"
said Benny. The children saw a wooden wagon with a big Palomino horse harnessed to it. The horse and wagon stood in the road next to the little train station. A friendly-looking bearded man sat in the front seat of the wagon. "Howdy, partners," he said, smiling. "My name is Bart. Trigger and I have been waiting for you." Trigger nodded his head up and down and snorted.
"We're going to ride in a real horse-driven wagon?"
asked Violet. Her eyes were open wide. "That's right," said Henry. "Grandfather arranged for his friend Bart to pick us up in true Wild West style." Henry extended his hand to Bart. "I'm Henry. Thank you for meeting us." "It's my pleasure," said Bart, shaking Henry's hand.
"Wow,"
Benny said again.
"We're so glad to meet you, Bart,"
said Jessie. She introduced her sister and younger brother, and they all climbed into the wagon. "Wildcat Crossing is not far from this stop," said Bart. "We'll be there in no time." He made a clucking sound, and Trigger set off at a slow trot.
"Look at all the cacti,"
said Jessie as they bounced along.
"I see yellow, orange, and red flowers on some of them,"
said Violet. Violet loved nature and pretty things. She pulled a camera from her bag and took photographs. Benny put his hand over his eyes to shield them from the bright sun.
"Look,"
he said, pointing.
"That's a huge rabbit out there. It's bigger than Watch."
The children watched as a jackrabbit loped across the scrubby terrain. Watch yipped. "Their big ears help them stay cool in the hot weather," said Henry. Henry had been reading about the Texas desert in preparation for their trip. "They can also run very fast, up to 40 miles an hour." "That's right," Bart said from the front seat. He guided Trigger through an open gate next to a large parking lot. A small group of cattle with huge horns watched them go by from a fenced area nearby. "And jackrabbits eat cactus. Imagine that."
"Yikes! That would hurt to eat those sharp thorns,"
said Benny.
"Are those your cows?"
he asked. "Those are real Texas Longhorn cattle," said Bart. "They're here for the festival.